Welcome to Storyflix. In this video, we will explain a romantic comedy about a young girl from a wealthy family who must find true love to break a special curse, which she inherits from her family. Will she be able to return as a normal woman? Let's see the entire storyline of Penelope. Penelope begins by showing a girl from the Wilhern family. The Wilhern family is one of the wealthiest noble families. Since birth, Penelope has had an unusual facial condition, which is her face that looks like a pig. It turns out that the origin of Penelope's pig face was obtained due to a curse. The story is drawn on the life of the first generation of Wilhern family. At that time, Penelope's ancestors had sexual relations with a lowly maid named Clara. As a result, Clara becomes pregnant and she demands responsibility for being married. Penelope's great-grandfather asked for his family's blessing, but he was immediately laughed at because a noble could not possibly marry a lowly servant. Finally, Penelope's great-grandfather married a noble girl who was equal to him. Hearing the news, Clara became very sad and decided to commit suicide by jumping off a cliff. Clara's mother, who is a witch, doesn't accept her daughter's death due to a breakup. She then cast a curse on the Wilhern family. The curse was that, if a daughter was born to the Wilhern family, she would have a face like a pig. The curse will only happen once. But the Wilhelms were very lucky because every child born in the next 5 generations was a boy. Even though there was actually a daughter born to the Wilhern family, the child turned out to be the result of an illicit relationship. One day Penelope was born. Jessica was shocked and saddened to find her daughter's face look like a pig. Since then, Jessica has become very overprotective of Penelope. Jessica consulted a doctor to change the shape of Penelope's face, but the doctor said that if her face was operated on, it was very likely that Penelope would die. Because Penelope was a member of a noble family, her face became the talk of the community. Since her birth, Jessica and Penelope's father, Franklin, have not allowed journalists and the outside public to see their daughter's face. But one day, a journalist named Lemon managed to break into the Wilhern family's house and take a picture of Penelope's face. Jessica quickly beat the reporter until he lost one eye. After that incident, Jessica deliberately faked Penelope's death so that her daughter would not become a public conversation. Her parents immediately distanced Penelope from the outside world to protect her. Penelope is forced to always live at home without ever knowing the outside world. Jessica then hires an assistant named Jake, who is in charge of looking after Penelope. Jessica is sure that the true love of a nobleman will break the curse. So when Penelope turned 18 years old, Jessica hired a matchmaking agency among the nobles named Wanda. But for 7 years, the matchmaking did not produce any results at all. All the men who saw Penelope's face immediately fled in fright. To prevent others from knowing about Penelope's face, Jake would arrest the men and threaten them not to tell anyone else. One day, a man named Edward managed to escape from Jake's clutches. He immediately went to the police station and reported his findings. Fortunately, the cops didn't believe him. Edward was even detained in a cell for spreading false news. Then Edward teamed up with Lemon, a journalist who had also seen Penelope's pig face. Moreover, it turns out that Lemon has a grudge against Jessica, who has damaged one of his eyes. Finally, Lemon asks Edward to return to Penelope's house, but Edward refuses. Lemon then looking for a man who wants to come to Penelope's matchmaking. After conducting an investigation, they found a man named Maxwell who liked to gamble. Because he was offered quite a lot of money, Maxwell finally agreed to come to Penelope's matchmaking event. Maxwell also came to Penelope's matchmaking event wearing a suit with a camera in it. The camera will automatically shoot when Max's arm is lifted. By then, Penelope was fed up with her failure to matchmake, so she decided to show her true face in person to all men. Seeing Penelope's pig face, all the men immediately fled. But then Max hid behind the sofa, so he didn't see Penelope's pig face. Jessica, Wanda, and Penelope were pleased when they realized there was a man who didn't run away when they saw Penelope's face. Penelope immediately chatted through the two-way mirror with Max. Even though they didn't meet face to face, Penelope felt a match when talking with Max. Finally, Penelope asked Max to play the piano for her. Having made a lot of mistakes, Penelope came into the room and helped him play the piano. It was then that Max saw Penelope's face for the first time. When he was about to touch Penelope's muzzle, he accidentally raised his hand, and that's when the camera he was hiding took a picture of Penelope's face. Penelope, disappointed at being taken advantage of, leaves immediately. She was sure that Max didn't really like her. Max finally goes to Lemon and says that Penelope isn't as bad as Edward said. Max immediately destroyed the camera that was in his suit. Unfortunately, the meeting was known by Jessica and Wanda. Jessica finally tells Penelope that Max is actually a spy. Even though she knows Max is a spy, Penelope still asks him to marry her. Because Penelope has fallen in love with Max. But Max says that he doesn't want to marry Penelope. Before he could explain his reason, Jessica and Wanda immediately kicked him out of the house. Penelope began to lose enthusiasm with her matchmaking, which always failed. Until finally, she decided to run away from home and see the outside world. And for the first time, Penelope finally stepped out of her mansion. In order not to be seen by others, Penelope covered her face with a scarf. Her parents were worried, but Penelope called and said she was okay. Penelope really enjoyed her freedom. On the other hand, Edward asked a painter to paint a picture of Penelope's face. The sketch of Penelope's face was then printed in newspapers and distributed. Edward announces that he will reward anyone who finds Penelope. Jessica saw the sketch of Penelope's face in the paper, and her worries grew. Jessica and Franklin decide to find Penelope with the help of the police. They arrived at the hotel where Penelope was staying. When she saw her parents, Penelope immediately ran away from the hotel. Penelope, who saw the sketch of her face in the newspaper, was tempted by the reward, especially since she was running out of money. So Penelope decided to give her photo to Lemon. Seeing her not scary face made Lemon feel guilty for disturbing Penelope's life all this time. But Edward is sure that Penelope is a monster. So he immediately took a photo of Penelope from Lemon and spread it around. The news of a pig-faced girl immediately shocked everyone. Then Max went to Lemon and returned the money he had received. Max, realizing that Penelope has found her freedom, decides to stop gambling and start playing the piano again. When Penelope visits a bar, she meets a woman named Annie. Penelope and Annie later became good friends. Annie takes Penelope around town to get to know the outside world better. Meanwhile, Penelope's parents try to find her daughter's whereabouts. Until they accidentally meet Penelope. Penelope immediately rushed to a bar. However, due to exhaustion, she fainted. Well, that's when everyone finally saw the real face behind a shawl covering her face. But instead of being afraid, the people at the bar liked Penelope's face. Unexpectedly, Penelope became so famous. Edward's father, realizing this, forces his son to marry Penelope so that their family is also famous. Jessica was so happy when she accepted Edward's proposal, especially when she hoped that Penelope's curse would disappear if she married. In fact, Penelope didn't want to marry Edward because she didn't love him. But her mother continued to force Penelope until she finally agreed to marry Edward. Meanwhile, Lemon discovers the surprising fact that Maxwell's real name is Johnny. Johnny deliberately disguised himself as Maxwell because he was tempted by the nominal prize offered by Edward. After Johnny finds out that Penelope and Edward are getting married, Johnny tries to tell Penelope about Edward's cunning. On Penelope and Edward's wedding day, Lemon comes to pass information about Johnny to Jessica. Lemon also spoke of Edward's trick. But Jessica did not want to cancel the marriage because she wanted to break the curse through marriage between nobles. The wedding ceremony took place. But Penelope realizes that her goal is to get married because she only wants to break the curse and not because of love. So in the middle of the wedding, she decided to run away and ran to her room. Her mother immediately asked Penelope to marry Edward so that the curse would disappear, but Penelope became annoyed that her mother kept forcing her to marry not out of love. Finally, Penelope says that she likes herself and doesn't want to have a new life. Suddenly a miracle happened. Penelope's pig nose disappeared in an instant. It turns out that the thing that can break the curse is when Penelope can love herself as she is. Jessica then apologized to Penelope for being too overprotective all this time. Jack finally chose to resign as a servant in the house. But Jessica did not accept Jack's departure and continued to nag. Until finally, Jack cursed Jessica to be mute. It turns out that Jake is a witch who has been casting a curse on the Wilhern family all along. When Penelope's face returned to normal, she decided to leave. Now she works as a teacher. One day, Penelope and Annie came to a Halloween party. There, Penelope reunites with Johnny. The two of them shared their love for each other. In the end, the two decided to live together. The story ends with happily ever after.